Everybody, Chris Webster here to talk about one of the latest supporters to the Archaeology Podcast Network, The Motley Fool. Now, I've been investing in the stock market through various applications for a few years now, and everybody who's listening to this can benefit from that sort of investment for the long-term financial planning. And also, I know the hosts of these podcasts can benefit because as archaeologists, like none of us get retirement. We all have to kind of fend for ourselves. So investing in the stock market is a good idea, but not everybody can do it. And look, we get it. The market is complicated and confusing, and to many of us, it simply doesn't make sense. In fact, where do you even start? Take all of the guesswork out of it with the Motley Fool Stock Advisor. The Motley Fool has been around for over 25 years and has been spot on in recommending some of the world's most important companies before they hit the big time. I'm talking about Amazon, Tesla, Netflix, Starbucks, all before they exploded in value. With their easy to use and super informative service, Stock Advisor, you could join the ranks before they potentially find the next big thing. After all, their average stock recommendation is up over 400% as of April 10th, 2023. And no need to be intimidated by financial jargon or market complexities. As the name suggests, these guys don't take themselves too seriously. Now, finances, that's a different story. Their friendly and relaxed approach has helped over 700,000 people move closer to financial independence, all while beating the market and having fun. New members can access Stock Advisor for only $89 for their first year, a full $110 off the full list price. Don't sit on the sidelines and think about what could have happened. Visit fool.com/APN to start your investing journey today. That's $110 discount off of $199 per year list price. Membership will renew annually at the then current list price. So again, check the link in the show notes of this episode.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to The Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeology Show, episode 210.
Today's show is the third episode in our Paleoanthropology series, and we are covering Paranthropus.
Let's dig a little deeper, but not into this genus and species because they don't really matter. That's mean.
That's mean.
Welcome to the show, everybody. How's it going?
Hello.
I hope this episode isn't too zinge-worthy. I mean, cringe-worthy.
Wow. Opening strong. Here we go.
You'll understand what that means in the final segment, so stick around for that. If you're one of those people that just like shuts off a podcast because the hosts are annoying in the first 2 minutes.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, I hear that. But if you want to hear about Zinge, then stick around.
Yeah.
Although he's not called Zinge anymore. I guess he's called Para.
Right.
But anyway. All right. So we're continuing our Paleoanthropology series here with episode 3. And we think we're going to have one. We know we're going to have one more.
Yeah.
We might be able to squeeze everything into that one, but there might be 2 more.
Because there's so much to say about the Homo species, right? So that's what our last episode will be. Today we're doing Paranthropus.
Yes.
But the Homo species, just there's so much in there and so much to talk about because as we move forward in time, we have more fossils and we have more examples and we have more research. We just have more of everything. The closer to, today we get, even though we're still really far away from today.
Right. So Paranthropus is a genus name that actually means, it translates to beside man, para and anthropos.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Right, right, in Latin. Yep. So they're actually evolved from the Australopithecine line that we talked about last time. Mm-hmm. They also lived, alongside of them a little bit, obviously, because there's different species here, different evolutionary paths.
Always overlap.
Yeah, but as we've talked about through this whole thing, not every one of the, I guess, species that either lived near or partially contributed, not contributed genetic information to, but just was like in this whole evolutionary span of walking upright, primates. Not all of them are direct ancestors to humans.
Yeah, because like we've talked about, we're talking about branching trees or bush, right? So sometimes the branch would just go off in another direction and end. And then some of the branches continued on down into the human line. And it seems like the Paranthropus branch did take off from the same place that the human branch did, the Homo branch did. Right. But it just went its own direction and then probably ended at some point. Well, definitely ended at some point. And then, the Homo branch went the other direction off of Australopithecine, though. So that, they are the common ancestor between us both. But that's where the commonalities end.
Right. Now, these guys lived between 2.9 and 1.2 million years ago. That 1.2 number is going to get important because they really did live alongside some of the Homo line of our ancestors.
Yes,
So
yeah.
it would have been crazy to see like multiple walking upright primate species.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
And all these little short guys too.
Yeah.
A bunch of things that are like less than 4 feet tall running around the savannah.
I know. And I wonder, like, because we don't really know much about their behavior, right? It's really hard to know that. All we can do is look at their bones and have the physical characteristics from that. But like, how similar were they? Were they as similar as us and chimpanzees are? Or was it much more closely related from a behavioral standpoint than that? And all we can do is guess, of course, but it would be really interesting to know. Yet another reason I want a time machine.
I know. And I was thinking about like Homo erectus and those others we're going to talk about next time. Man, that first kind of baby that was born with like no hair, bigger head, and just been like, what the heck is this freak show that just came out of me? And obviously it doesn't happen that way. It's more gradual than that. But somebody had to have been born, starting to look similar. Again, it's very much gradual, and you may not have noticed it, but I just, in my mind, I want it to be that way.
Right.
Like all of a sudden, bam.
Yeah.
Here you go.
I know. I think all of a sudden, bam is not a phrase that describes evolution like ever. Probably
how evolution works.
It's nice to think that, but
maybe in fruit flies, because they evolve like
yes,
every 100 generations, which happen in like a week.
Right. So sure, we'll give it to that one.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're also known as robust Australopithecines. They're very just like meaty and beefy from a bone standpoint.
Yeah.
With huge crushing jaws, which we'll talk about. But the Australopithecines were more gracile, we call it. They're just more delicate, I guess.
And so gracile, it's used specifically to describe hominid species, and it just means that they are of slender build, essentially.
Right.
So more delicate, slender, that kind of a thing.
Right, indeed. There are 3 known species of the Paranthropus genus, and we're going to talk about those in the next few segments here. This next one's really hard to pronounce, but it's Aethiopicus.
Aethiopicus.
It's the AE sound, or I guess combination of vowels.
Yeah.
THIO and then picus, PICUS. Aethiopicus.
Yeah.
And then Robustus and Boisei.
Right.
Boisei is the most interesting one to me. We'll get to that in the final segment. So looking at Paranthropus Aethiopicus, man, I am just not going to get that right. You guys don't know this, but I've edited out me screwing that up many times at this point.
Like a lot of times. But you notice how many times I've even tried to say it?
I know, right?
Like once.
Yeah,
So.
Indeed. So anyway, 2.7 to about 2.3 million years ago. The original time span here, I said, was 2.9 to 1.2 million years ago. We're just talking rough numbers here.
Yeah, this is generalizations for these different species.
Right. And I think that when they come up with the ranges for these time spans that these beings lived, the certain genus or even a genus and species combination, they're trying to probably take into account the variation in the dating. So the dating is not exact because they're not dating the fossils directly like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They're dating the layers around the fossils. So it's subject to a little bit of, 100,000 year range,
Yep.
And 2.7 and 2.9 million years, the difference there is 200,000 years.
Yeah.
So that's not very long in the span of human evolution or any evolution.
Any evolution. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So when I say 2.7, that's probably just because they were found in a layer that dates to between 2.7 and 2.3 million years, right? So that's probably what that means.
Yep.
But anyway, Eastern Africa in the Turkana Basin of northern Kenya, southern Ethiopia. And that's more than likely where the name comes from, is leading towards Ethiopia, Aethiopicus.
Right.
So...
And the fossil was discovered by Alan Walker and Richard Leakey and is known as the famous black skull.
Yeah, it was actually really dark colored, and they just called it the black skull.
The black skull, yeah.
Yeah. It was. I've seen pictures of it, and I've seen what is it called? A reproduction of it. Yeah, because my university, we had reproductions of all the big.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The big names.
Yeah. Definitely, it's one of the ones that's taught in all paleoanthropology classes, and it is much darker. But I imagine that when the bones are going through the process of turning into fossils, basically the fossilization process, crazy things can happen. Minerals are weird, and whatever compounds are in there just just causes this one to turn dark.
Right. Now this one, again, you're going to hear this for probably all of these, but it had a strongly protruding face. So that kind of sticky out face that you see in like certain ape species, right? And
like imagine a gorilla or an orangutan kind of, right? Like that sort of protruding mouth.
Very large teeth. They actually called them like megadont teeth, like they're huge teeth. Powerful jaw, as well as a well-developed sagittal crest on the top of the skull. Now that's kind of their shark fin.
Yeah.
But it's what the sagittal crest is for, though, is attaching the chewing muscles from the jaw.
Right.
They literally attach all the way up the side of the skull up to this sagittal crest and allow you to have that crushing force.
Yeah.
For your jaws to just eat basically whatever you want.
That's why their jaws are so strong, and they needed it probably because they're chewing this like really fibrous diet basically. So they needed that kind of muscle to break it down and process it. So yeah.
The fossil that was discovered for this particular species, the name of it was proposed in 1967, and again it describes a toothless partial mandible that the discoverers thought differed enough from early hominins to warrant a new genus and species. So we didn't actually have some of the other stuff that we had yet. And actually there were other things that were found that were actually renamed into these Paranthropus species once we had more examples of them and people realized they were different, or maybe they were uncategorized and then they could be recategorized. Yeah,
it's interesting when you get a really good sample from the skull, that's when you can really start differentiating species, because that's where you see these differences that cause you to be like, oh, wait a minute, this is a lot bigger, or this is a lot smaller, or this is forward or back or whatever. And those are the things that they're using to create a new species, basically.
Right. Yeah. So that first one in 1967 didn't really fly with most paleoanthropologists.
It never does in the beginning,
I know,
right?
They're like, we need a little bit more information.
Yeah. A mandible's not enough.
I know, but the discoverers with that were actually smarter than I think they were. And the idea of this species came back with that black skull discovery by Alan Walker and Richard Leakey. And the realization that it did, in fact, have a mixture of derived and primitive traits. And this is very similar to Australopithecus afarensis, and very well could be a descendant of Australopithecus afarensis. And Australopithecus afarensis, if you remember from the last episode, or if you didn't hear it, go listen to it, was Lucy, the famous fossil Lucy. And I was like, is this Lucy's great-great-great-great-great-grandchild?
There's probably many greats in there,
no,
but it's possible because they were found in a similar area, right?
Yeah,
so
they
it's
were.
definitely possible.
Yeah, there could be some relation going on there. I would imagine the males kind of got around. So
yeah, isn't it? It's kind of like how we're all related to Genghis Khan, or like a large portion of the population is related to Genghis Khan because, well, he was a guy that got around, and so
yeah. All right. Well, now we're going to head over to South Africa to the first Paranthropus that was discovered that actually kicked off this whole genus. Back in a minute.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 210. We're talking about Paranthropus beside man, or really beside, hominins. Not really man
beside
yet.
person. Come on, don't leave us out over here.
I don't know. Anyway, so the next one is Paranthropus robustus. And these guys lived from, again, about 1.8 to 1.2 million years ago in South Africa. Not South Africa, the country, but like Southern Africa.
Right.
So they had a
probably including South Africa, but
sure.
like larger than just that.
Yeah. When we say South Africa, we mean Southern Africa. Discovered in 1938 by Robert Broom. Oh. And it's funny, he didn't actually dig up the first one. He bought a jaw fragment and a molar that he didn't think looked like Australopithecines that he'd seen. And in fact, buying fossils was pretty common back in that day.
Yeah.
There was another anthropologist I read about, which we'll probably get to in the next segment when we talk about Java Man in the next episode. What the heck is his name? I read whole books about him. But anyway, he was pretty famous for hiring people to work on his excavations and then paying for the fossils they pulled out.
Oh, I see.
Because that's how they paid them for their work, basically. Yeah. Which was a problem early on, and I'm assuming that was a problem down here too, because you were paid by the number of fossils you brought. So the natives got pretty wise to that and started breaking them.
Oh no, are you serious? Oh wow.
So anyway, should have had a rule that if it refits back together, you're charged with one.
It just goes to show you that humans are kind of the same everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got grandfathers collecting projectile points on their mantle here in the United States, and you have native peoples in Africa just collecting, fossilized jawbones that they find when they're out walking around in the savannah. It is what it is. Humans just want to collect that kind of stuff. It's
there you go.
Kind of a hard behavior to convince people to get past.
I know. Well, and people want to support their families, and
true.
they're going to do what they got to do.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's a part of me that's like, yeah, do what you got to do. That's fine.
Indeed. So Broom actually did explore the area down there, and he explored specifically the area called Kromdraai. I don't know if it's dry or what, but it's Kromdraai. I don't know how to pronounce that in Afrikaans, which is probably the language.
Yeah,
I'm not
probably.
really sure, actually, though.
Because this is actual South Africa, this particular discovery.
Yeah, and he collected a lot more bones and teeth, and named the species Paranthropus robustus back again in 38, 39, give or take. So, and again, this is another robust Australopithecine. So still coming down from that Australopithecus line. The Australopithecines are basically all over Eastern and Southern Africa. We don't hear a lot about West Africa. And I'm not sure if that's because we don't have like the Great Rift Valley and some of the other environments that would allow for the exposure and digging in these fossil beds. Because there's a lot of desert and just sand dunes out in like Central and Western Africa.
Yeah.
Although there have been some, we mentioned the first segment, we found in Central Africa, like Chad, Sahelanthropus chadensis.
I mean, it's all about the preservation conditions, right? So if it wasn't good when they were there in that time, then we probably won't have fossils, and we'll never have fossils because, it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's political too. Like, I don't know how much activity there is over there from an excavation standpoint because of some of the political instability in some of those West African countries.
Yeah, and if it's not safe or whatever, true.
Anyway, he also had large megadont teeth, I love that word, with thick enamel, large cheekbones, massive chewing muscles, which obviously gave him a large, or them, I should say, a large sagittal crest for attaching those jaw muscles.
Yeah.
And then the robustus part actually refers to the tooth and face size, not the body size. They were still pretty short, 3 to 4 feet, maybe a little taller, but still small. I mean, think of your small apes that you would see in a zoo, basically standing up full time, but not standing up. When a chimpanzee stands up, it looks like it's awkward for them. Like they don't really want to stand up. It's not comfortable.
Right.
But we're talking about standing up, like standing up.
Like all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's their primary, way that they're getting around. So.
Exactly.
So I have a question, because I read on one of the articles I was looking at that super large sagittal crest that really just comes off the top of the skull like a fan almost, like it really sticks right up, and that's where their chewing muscles were attached to, of course. I read that is kind of similar to how gorillas are, like a modern gorilla. Their skull looks like that. And so it makes me wonder if the Paranthropus line is headed towards the gorilla evolution. I don't know. I don't know enough about primatology to really know like if it went that direction or not.
I'm not sure, but I feel like the sheer size of gorillas
they are a lot
them on
bigger.
a completely different line.
Yeah.
Because they would have had to get pretty big in a relatively evolutionarily short period of time.
Yeah. So these guys are much smaller. They just have similar characteristics.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, gorillas are still primates, but not all primates are, created equal.
Right. They all have, I mean, obviously there's a common ancestor somewhere back there, but
if you go back
it's
far
like,
enough.
where is it?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's would be a whole other series is to go through the primatology evolutionary line.
I'm just willing to bet that gorillas aren't part of it at all, only because I've studied a lot of paleoanthropology and I've never once heard gorillas mentioned.
Be included. Yeah. True.
It's always chimpanzee, which again is not even true. Yeah. I don't know why it's chimpanzee. It's probably because we're
closest.
It's the closest we are still to that species. Yeah. Like humans and chimpanzees, we're probably the closer to them than anything else. But that just means that we evolved with them from a common ancestor. Yeah. Right. So there's other people that are not writing about human evolution that are finding, they're still doing paleontology. That's just regular paleontology. That's not paleoanthropology. They're still finding fossils of other animals, and there's whole, family bushes.
Evolutionary lines. Yeah.
for those animals as well.
Totally.
So.
Yeah. The whole field is really fascinating to see how one species transforms into another given enough time and the right conditions.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to take another short break, and we're going to come back and talk about my favorite one, Paranthropus boisei, because I've been to where this one was excavated from. Back in a minute.
Hey there, entrepreneurs. What's the easiest choice you can make? Outsourcing tasks you hate. What about selling with Shopify? Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage, Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. With their all-in-one e-commerce platform and in-person POS system, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average. Plus, you can sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. I love how Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/dax, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/dax now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. That's shopify.com/dax.
Welcome back to the Paranthropus edition of the Archaeology Show. And this is going to be a shorter episode, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to have this be a distinct piece, right? There just wasn't enough to talk about for Paranthropus, at least at our knowledge level.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to keep these as distinct pieces, like I said. So we had kind of the pre-Australopithecines in episode 1, if you haven't heard of this.
Yep.
Which was actually episode 208.
Yep.
Episode 209, our part 2 of this series, was Australopithecus. And all the Australopithecines, and now we're talking about Paranthropus, and then in the next edition, possibly 2, if we can't fit it into 1, will be the Homo line.
Yep.
So Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, Homo habilis.
We might even touch on Neanderthals and Denisovans just a little bit, although we have done whole series on them as well.
We have, but they're part of the conversation.
They are. They're part of it.
This is why we might end up doing 2 episodes.
Maybe.
We might just have to do a cleanup episode, to be honest, to talk about the things that,
a wrap up. There's just so much. There's so much. I took a whole class on this in college, a whole entire semester devoted to this stuff, and we are squeezing it into 4 to 5, 30 to 45 minute episodes. But that does mean that this episode is a little bit shorter because there's just not quite as much material to talk about here. And you know what? That's all right.
Yeah. So here's another one. Again, Paranthropus boisei that lived pretty much right alongside of Paranthropus robustus. It was after Aethiopicus, or they could have overlapped a little bit. We just don't have the fossils for it, but definitely lived alongside Robustus, at least in time, maybe not in actual place.
Yeah.
Because these guys are up around Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania. So like the northern version versus the southern version, right?
Right.
They lived from 2.3 to 1.2 million years ago. Discovered in 1959 by Mary Leakey in Olduvai Gorge. Olduvai Gorge is in western Tanzania, out near the Serengeti. And it was actually formerly called Zinjanthropus boisei, and Zinj was the shortened name. And honestly, I've read about this, and I cannot remember where Zinj comes from. That name, Zinj. I can't remember why she called it that, or where that came from. It's some nickname for that area or somebody there, but I just can't remember. Rachel might be looking it up right now.
I am. The name derives from Zinj, an ancient Arabic word for the coast of East Africa.
Well, there you go.
Yep.
They weren't really on the coast, but close enough, I guess.
Kind of getting there.
Yeah. The skull was officially called OH5, Olduvai hominid 5, and again named Zinj. And it is the type specimen for P. boisei, Paranthropus boisei. When you see these written down, they usually have a capital letter for the genus, and then lowercase, usually italicized for the species. That's how these go. So that's why I read it that way. It's in my notes that way. And it was the most famous early human fossil from Olduvai Gorge. There's a lot of stuff that's been found from Olduvai Gorge.
Yeah, I was going to say, Olduvai Gorge is like the gift that keeps on giving to both paleoanthropologists and also to just fossils in general of all kinds of different species. Like when you were there, you didn't even find any human stuff. You found not that I know of, like giant animals, basically, right?
We'll talk about my experiences there in a minute, because I do want to talk pretty heavily about that because it was such a cool time. But they nicknamed him the Nutcracker Man, which was another nickname that Zinj had, again, because of the big teeth and strong chewing muscles attached to a large sagittal crest, which is somewhat of a hallmark of this species and this whole genus. Yeah. The flaring cheekbones gave him a wide, dish-shaped face, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. The cheek teeth were 4 times the size of modern humans. So, again, big old mouth.
The facial features suggest that Zinj could have eaten tough foods, but the wear patterns on the teeth suggest they had a more diverse diet that included softer foods.
Which this kind of leads into you thinking, okay, so he's evolved for one thing, but the landscape is probably changing as they do with climate. And they're eating different foods as indicated by their wear patterns. They're evolved to eat, more tough foods, but the foods are changing and they're changing with it, but their bodies haven't changed yet.
Which is super interesting. I love that they have the good wear patterns on the teeth that they can study because the earlier versions would have needed teeth that could handle tougher foods. But as they start evolving and sort of, getting away from that kind of diet, then it's starting to change. And this feels very like transitional. Like they could have eaten these kind of foods, but the where says they ate these kind of foods. It's a really neat like transition point.
Well, and it's cool too. We got to be careful when we talk about what causes evolution. Nothing really causes evolution. Evolution happens because it's a mutation in your genetic code. Is that mutation beneficial in some way to help you basically produce more offspring, right? So they could have been, again, evolved to eat these tough foods, but as their landscape changed, the ones that were able to adapt to that softer food, either just mentally, just like I'm going to eat this stuff instead of this stuff, could have been more successful for a longer period of time and had more offspring.
Right.
And then, eventually those offspring, if they had some of the same ideas and maybe some of them were born with, starting to get smaller teeth and things like that, they would have been even more well adapted to the food that their parents are eating. Right. And then they would have had even more offspring because they were more successful. And that's just how that's how that happens.
Yeah.
But it's
very gradual though. It's not just across one generation. It's many generations, and
it's a long time.
It takes so much time for it to happen. But you can see in this fossil like how it's starting to go that direction. It's really cool.
Yeah. And people say that evolution takes, when you hear evolution takes millions of years, and then some people will say, well, I saw some things evolve quicker. It's like, it really just depends on luck in a lot of cases, right? Like if you had some catastrophic event for an entire species, but a few of them were adapted to survive the event or the environment that the event created, if the right circumstances apply and there's a mutation in their offspring over enough generations that allow them to survive in this new environment, then they will endure. But in most cases, the species just dies.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They probably all didn't die during the meteor impact of what's now 66 million years ago, not 65.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was redefined by geologists.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Actually, I just saw that just recently.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so a lot of them probably did live through that. They didn't die immediately.
Yeah.
But they couldn't survive in the new environment, and their offspring weren't able to change enough, to adapt to that new environment.
Yeah, because you need diversity within a population in order for the population to continue on. And if you don't have enough diversity, then actually like some of the bad traits might get passed down, and then all of a sudden you're not able to produce offspring like you should, and then the species dies away. Like that's one of the ways that an evolutionary line can end. Right.
Do you want to read the next bullet point? Go ahead.
P. boisei is thought to descend from P. aethiopicus. They lived in the same area, separated by a few 100,000 years.
Man, I really thought you'd stumble over Aethiopicus.
Oh, you wanted me to read? Yeah. Oh, I was like, why are you trying to get me to read that point? I heard you stumble enough times. I figured out how to pronounce it.
Yeah. Boisei also, or I'm just going to say Zinj, also lived alongside other species of early humans that we'll talk about in the next episode. I mean, they were around, according to the fossil record, for over 1 million years.
That is so much time. Yeah. Like that is a huge amount of time.
And unchanging enough to be the same species.
Like we haven't even been around for 1 million years.
No, not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the best estimates are, I think it's now 200,000 to 400,000 years for Homo sapiens. Yep. Yeah. So anyway, it's just one of the many side branches of human evolution, Paranthropus is. But scientists, again, do not think it led to Homo sapiens.
Just shared a common ancestor.
They think we had a common ancestor before that, and they basically died out. They were a line that just didn't continue. Now, the fossil record may prove that false at some point.
Yeah, it could.
And it's also, we're looking at traits here, and that's the only thing we can look at. We don't have any DNA from something this old. And if there was any sort of weirdly preserved fleshy bits, I don't think they get anything from the DNA anyway, but 1 million year old fleshy bit, that seems unlikely.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely. And would you trust it even if you did have something? It just, Yeah.
The 1975 discovery of Paranthropus boisei and H. Homo erectus in the same layer, there was a dig back then. They found these two in the same layer, was the first example of species coexistence, in fact.
Yeah.
So we've just had relative dates that are overlapping, but didn't know if they were actually living in the same area.
Right. Yeah. So they're found in the same layer of the same area too, so like they could have physically overlapped.
Yeah.
And also like what is the length of time for that?
Well, again, so they're usually dating volcanic layers. So they may have found both of these in the same layer, but that layer may have a 400,000 year time span.
That's what I'm kind of wondering.
Yeah, it's not like they were neighbors.
There's no way for them to really know because again, you're just dating these layers. One could have been above or below, but then you also have some like geologic movement that can
Right.
move things up and down too. So it's hard
But
to say.
if you've got multiple examples of these, because we do now, if you got examples of these in the same geological time span, then I mean, there's no reason to assume they didn't know about each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or even fought against each other, or even collaboratively worked with each other. Who knows?
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
So, I mean, they wouldn't have been collaborative in the sense of like humans like we know now, but like other animal species.
It makes you wonder if there was some mixing of genetics, some breeding or whatever, interbreeding.
Sure.
That would mix their genetics in with, what became modern humans. So,
But we would see some traits from them in the Homo line.
Would
Yeah.
you though? Like you might not. We don't really see we don't physically see any Neanderthal traits in us, but we do know that there are some.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, if they didn't, they could have interbred or even violently interbred, but which
Right.
species did,
Right.
but just didn't produce viable offspring.
Yeah.
Right. So then the
right.
traits were not passed down
Yeah.
to either of them.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's about it for this one. We've got, this is the whole Paranthropus line here, basically. These are the 3 species in it. And we do have a number of fossils now for some of these and some good evidence for them. And again, nothing that officially links them down to what human descendants. But we do have evidence that links them to Australopithecus. So they are that
Right.
middle ground and that branch that, like we said, died off.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Next time around, we are going to start getting into the Homo line. Still back a million years, though.
Yep.
You know, we got a lot of stuff to talk about back there.
Yeah.
And then it really starts to, get a little more mixy in the last like 500,000 to 800,000 years. But then all of a sudden they start dropping like flies, and then there's just one left.
Yep.
So, and that only happened about 30, 40,000 years ago. So,
Yeah, it's crazy how relatively recent it is when
Yeah.
you're thinking about it from a evolutionary standpoint.
Right. I did mention earlier in this segment that I wanted to talk about my time in Africa real quick. It was really, really cool. It
Yeah.
was 2005. I had just finished college, and I had actually applied in my last year of college to Arizona State University for their paleoanthropology program. They did not accept me.
I think you have mentioned that before.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just, I wasn't right for the job, or for the position, I should say. I probably wasn't mentally ready for it, and I definitely didn't have the grades and stuff for it. I had the interest in it, but I just wasn't, they picked probably better people. But I was still very much interested, and I wanted to go to a field school. I wasn't interested in any other field schools, and I found through Earthwatch, somebody turned me on to that at my school. And Earthwatch is an organization that does like this ecotourism kind of stuff, but it's a working vacation where you learn stuff and you get to work with different scientists doing different things. It's not just archaeology and stuff. In fact, it's mostly not. But when you do that, you pay to go there, and that money goes to help fund the project, right? So it's
research.
really, you get to learn something and it helps fund it. Now, there were other ways I could have gone there, but they were looking for grad students on these projects and, people at universities and stuff like that, just from an insurance standpoint, probably. But this Earthwatch dig was not. And so that's how I went. It wasn't cheap, but it was totally worth it. So I spent 3 weeks in Olduvai Gorge, living in the Leakey camp, and, being guarded by Maasai tribe that was nearby. That was like a half day's walk away. And they came out every day. And it was, maybe not a half day, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a long ways. Only took us a little bit by vehicle, but they had to go like through the gorge and around to get over to us. But anyway, that was really neat. And we did an excavation in a layer in Olduvai Gorge, a bottom layer. Olduvai Gorge, they were saying even back then that it might be played out fossil wise. As far as there's a lot more fossils in there, but as far as what we can learn from those, we're just finding the same things over and over again.
Yeah, right.
Because Olduvai Gorge has a base layer of about 2.01 million years, because that's where the super thick basalt is, and nobody's ever gone through that. And there wouldn't probably be much under there anyway, because it's so thick.
Right.
So that's where it is. You've got surface now down to 2.01 million years, and we have a really strong fossil record for that time frame.
What physical depth is that?
Oh man, it depended where you were in the gorge, but it could have been anywhere from, I'll speak in feet, but anywhere from, 20 feet to 40 feet.
Oh, okay.
60 feet.
Yeah.
The gorge is pretty deep in some areas.
Yeah. But not like crazy
Not
deep.
like Grand Canyon.
Yeah, right.
And it's relatively wide too. There were some steep walls in places, but it's a wide meandering gorge. It's called the Rift Valley because that part of East Africa, everything that's considered East Africa is essentially ripping away from the mainland. And at some point, the Rift Valley is going to fill up with the Red Sea. and it's just going to dump into it.
Yeah.
And create this whole inland sea and then this whole peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of basically the landmass where Saudi Arabia is. This is essentially what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely going to happen here at some point. I mean, we've
like geologically some point. So,
yeah, it's not going to be any time soon.
Like probably not like in our lifetimes, but
right. But it's a very visible thing on the landscape. Like when we were driving out from Arusha, I think it was called Arusha in Tanzania, where I met everybody and we got into our vans to go out to the camp. The camp is almost all the way out on the edge of the Serengeti. I mean, it is on the edge of the Serengeti. So it's way out there from the main town, Arusha in Tanzania, where we were. And we literally drove up the escarpment, like where it is. There's a huge difference in the landscape where you're just driving along, and then you'd have to switch back up the escarpment, and then you're on top of it.
Yeah,
and it's an area that's just like way higher elevation, just naturally, than the rest of that portion of Africa. So it was really cool. But anyway, we saw lots of places around in there. We again uncovered extinct hippos and all these other things, and didn't find any hominid stuff that we were aware of, but they didn't do the full analysis while we were there. And all that was just really, really neat. And the Zinj site that we went to, a very, very detailed excavation. Mary Leakey was incredibly meticulous and really controlled her excavations with an iron fist. I mean, the back wall of this excavation was probably 20 feet high, and it was ridiculously straight.
Right.
Like the excavation was just like precise.
Yeah, and they're not using heavy machinery to do this either. This is all done by hand.
They're doing pickaxes mostly. It's very dense stuff. We dug with pickaxes.
Right.
And it was just like it's backbreaking work, really. But you walk up there and there it is, and it was just a really cool thing. So anyway, that was a really awesome experience. We got to go to a Maasai market where I think it's once a month or something like that, or maybe even once a week. I don't know. A lot of Maasai tribes nearby, they trek over to here to trade and do whatever they're going to do. And they benefit from the tourist trade too, because it's always in the same place. And, tour companies bring tourists there to buy stuff from them. I bought some things. And we also went to the Serengeti for a day. That's where I saw the lions eating a warthog, which was crazy. I think I've talked about it on this show before. And it was just really awesome.
Yeah,
really cool experience. So it was really neat to see what the African savanna looks like from that standpoint.
It's not like Lion King.
It's a lot like Lion King, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it looks like that.
Yeah.
There's no like elephant graveyard or anything, but it looks like the savannah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it looks like today. So it was just really neat. We went to Ngorongoro Crater too, which is a big, huge volcanic crater that's really sunk in, like a big caldera, I think, in the middle of it. You go up this rim and then you come back down into the crater. And along the crater edge, like 1,000 feet or more off the floor of the crater, is like resorts. Not very many of them. There's a handful of them. Like they took us Americans and a few of the people that were working with us from Tanzania to one of the resorts where we had lunch. We had our first properly prepared meal, not just like a camp meal.
Oh, right.
The camp meals were great, but they were camp meals.
Food. Yeah.
And we had Coca-Cola, which after 2 weeks of being in there, like we were just downing some Coca-Cola because we just didn't have that over there. And it was a really cool view looking out over the crater, which was really nice. But down in the crater, we saw flocks and flocks and flocks of flamingos, big herds of wildebeest and cheetahs. And there weren't any elephants in there from what I remember, or giraffe, I don't think. I think there were zebras in there. There were definitely lions in there.
So like you can just sit up top and like watch all the activity down below, basically?
It looks like a scene out of a Disney movie.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but we were down in it.
As
well. We drove down in it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll never forget when, anytime you saw a collection of vehicles, other people gathered around there because something big was happening. And we got in this line of vehicles that stopped on the side of the road, and you shut your engine off, and we put the top up on the van that we were in, and we're all standing up looking and going, what's going on? What's going on? And there was a big male lion, not a lioness, lion coming from like left to right as we were looking at it. And he was just walking. He's used to seeing vehicles, doesn't even care.
Yeah.
Walked between two of them, like two up in front of us. And he just continued off onto the right, but I think we were on the left side of the road because I have a photograph of that lion. It just stopped in the middle of the road, not in front of the vehicles, but off to the side, and just took a huge crap. just like right there, like any cat would.
Like we don't care. Or
Right.
I don't care that you're here at all.
No, and then he like pawed at it a little bit like a kitty would, and then just kept walking really slowly. Yeah, and just kept moving on. So anyway, it was an amazing experience. I really want to get back to Africa at some point. And
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It was just it was really cool to contribute to the scientific record a little bit while we were there too, not just being tourists.
Yeah,
So,
I mean that's such a cool, historic place for fossils.
Yeah,
so
for
it's neat
sure.
that you got to work there.
Yep. Right. Well, we do have a bonus track for this episode, and it's only, I know we could have probably fit it in time-wise here. I really wanted to talk about it because it does relate to the conversation that we're having, and it's got a relatively inflammatory headline about pushing the origins of intelligent life on Earth back 300,000 years.
Oh, you know those inflammatory
I know.
headlines. They love to try to bring people in with stuff
Yep.
that's not necessarily true. But
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we will see you guys next week with the 4th edition of our Paleoanthropology series.
And members, don't forget to go over to the website so that you can download the bonus segment. And if you're not a member, hey, check it out. Maybe
That's
you want
right.
to become one. Support us.
arcpodnet.com/members. You can be part of our members only Slack team. If you don't know what Slack is, it's just a chat tool basically.
Yep.
That's free. Doesn't cost you anything, and we add you to that team as part of your membership. And then the Slack team notifies you when our episodes come out early, and also when we have bonus episodes. So you get to listen to them commercial free. Right now everything's commercial free if you're listening to this in real time. But eventually they won't be. And you get to listen to it whenever you want, commercial free. And then also, again, the new stuff. So $7.99 a month right now, unless you're listening to this way in the future and that's changed.
Yep.
But if it's early 2023, $7.99 a month, and then comes out to like $76 or something like that because you get a 25% discount if you do annually.
Yep.
Lots more benefits coming down. And Tristan, my co-founder, and I have already decided that we will never raise the price because we want to be mostly ad supported and not, we want to add more features, but not add more cost.
Yeah, we don't want
to the members.
We don't want people to be paying money if we can help it. We'd rather advertisers pay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
But we do want to provide a little extra to
Yeah.
those people that decide
do.
to support us.
Yeah.
So
Because we appreciate it.
indeed. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.arcpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArcPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Culturo Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Oh, oh,